There's two instances when it doesn't go to plan. One is if you don't perhaps end up in the school that you had hoped your child was going to end up in. And in the competitive world in which we are in London, that happens to lots of us. And the other one is if for whatever reason your child isn't thriving at the school that you have ended up at.
For most people who sit in these very competitive London environments, the majority of people won't get into the school that they have preordained as their first choice. It's just a fact. And I think what we should all recognise is in that instance that is not the end of the world. There are many good schools, and we're blessed where we are here with the opportunity to have such choice.
Roughly how many should you be looking at or putting down the wretched deposits for in London, would you think, when they're little?
I think to be on the safe side, you're probably looking at 5 or 6 schools that you need to be directly involved with.
Yeah. Whichever school you do end up in, it is crucial that your child thinks that this is the best place that they could possibly be. What are the type of common problems that you do see and that we should as parents expect as sort of part of run-of-the-mill?
Okay. I mean, let's assume that that's arriving at 4.
Yeah, yes, literally.
Just for argument's sake. And I think it's safe to say that schools now are much better at making sure that arrival time is well planned in advance. It shouldn't come as a shock, because it is it's quite a significant day for a 4-year-old suddenly to be with their new class and absorbed into this new environment. But what schools will have done will be to have had acclimatisation days and begin to create a sense of community. So mostly, if it doesn't go right initially, there might be a few early morning tears on that first day, but I don't think we're really talking about that. We're talking about over the course of the first few months
or even
and
years,
early years. It's quite likely that it's going to be social rather than academic, because at a very young age, of course, the children are mostly involved in play, creative play, learning play, and it's less of an academic focus, which is quite as measurable, that might cause difficulties. So I think it's likely to be something that's unsettling, perhaps with friendship groups, possibly with dynamics in the class, possibly with a teacher, and I think it'll be associated with those sort of emotions. What I would always say is that the communication, when it comes, when you feel that you want to take something to the school, it should always be in person. Of course, email to set up a meeting, but I think you should be talking to people rather than emailing. Because it's about creating relationships that will then work in the best interests of your child. So do please, if something troubles you and you think it's significant enough to warrant contact with the school, please set up meetings with the teachers. And no doubt, because we're all human, you share these problems and you've probably discussed them with your friends, and you'll get all sorts of different responses from your friends as to how to deal with them. But Emily made reference to not wanting to be the parent that everybody dreads meeting, and of course there are parents who are like that. We all know that that's the case. Be open, be honest, be fair, be balanced, and communicate. Another really important thing to do is look at outcomes. Look at what the children are producing. And you raised the example of history. Look at what it is they're actually doing in their history. Look at what they're producing. And you might actually see that there is an awful lot of good happening, and there may just not be a chemistry between the people. So I think it's about understanding context.
You can move a child relatively easily. What's your view on how that affects a child? Is it something one can sort of do relatively willy-nilly? I mean, they're quite resilient, or...
Okay. From experience, I think people very rarely move their children. I think to take the decision to move is... it's not necessarily extreme, but it's a really significant decision, and it will be done for very specific reasons. It won't be just because the history teacher wasn't quite connecting. There will have been a development of reasons and a cocktail of things that have caused that to happen, and that will have escalated up the chain from the teacher through the form tutor, perhaps the head of year, deputy head, you'll be talking to people all the time, and you'll have got to that point. I suspect it won't just be because the child just doesn't quite like it, and therefore you will be in a position where once it becomes obvious that it's something you should do, you probably should do it once you've explored all sorts of avenues. Yeah. But it's very rare, and I think it's worth saying that you can probably do that once in a child's career in school, but you shouldn't be doing it more than once because it is so extreme. And generally, schools are very, very willing to solve problems. The impact of peer group is significantly enlarged when the school is smaller, because the peer group is smaller, and therefore the dynamics are much more tightly compact, and they will have more immediate impact on everybody in that group. Yeah. If you're in a big year group, 50, 60 in a year group, then there will always be like-minded other people outside your class that you will find, and you will find them.
Over-tutoring a child to get into a school that they shouldn't be at, you're not doing them any favours.
They've got to have a strength, whether it's their academic strength, it might be art, music, drama, sport, that allows them to flourish in their new space on their own 2 feet. Perhaps academically you want to be thinking that you're having a child that's in the top half of the year group because they'll feel comfortable. Your plan, and let's bring it back to the title, what if it doesn't go to plan? You're making the plans. The children aren't making these plans. They're your plans, but it's your child, and you've got to begin to understand what your child's capabilities are so that you might have to adapt your plan. And very often it will go wrong if parents don't listen to school's advice.
Can you give a rule of thumb as to how long you should leave it if you feel your child isn't terribly happy?
I think honestly depends on the severity of the unhappiness. This is all quite depressing, sorry, but it happens very infrequently, but I think this is a really important point, because when it does happen, if it is significant, and I use the word severe, that might not quite be the right word, but you've got to be able to act quickly. It's really important then that you take decisive action. There's something going on with you as parents in your family lives, and that obviously covers a range of things. It's vital that the school understands that there is context. If something really significant does happen, there is very definitely a positive way forwards if you can find it. You will find it, but you won't find it if you're overly defensive and not able to involve all parties. But everybody should know that schools communicate. We all communicate with each other. We have very open relationships, and it's almost certain that if you aren't telling the receiving school, your current school will be telling, because quite simply, if it was me potentially receiving the child, I'd be asking the questions, and if I wasn't getting the answers, I'd be pushing. It's about perspective and resilience with your children. I think the takeaway is, yes, have your plan, but understand that it's not set in stone. Give them the capability to deal with things when it doesn't go to plan, because that is the most important thing. Support, love, and resilience.